Those Days with the Monsters, Part 56. The bright light overhead had dimmed significantly. Either Kirill was on some kind of station mimicking a planet, or the planet he was on had rotated away from its blue-white star. Either way, it felt like a long time had passed. The Tyzx around him moved in an even, methodical way. They hadn't stopped since the low-voiced Tyzx said to try a broadcast. Kirill didn't know what they were all doing, but it seemed very technical. By the Maw, the higher-voiced Tyzx, Tsuna, if Kirill remembered accurately, was flipping through his journal. Kirill would be angry about it, but he found himself more afraid with each comment. Having a journal was turning out to have been a very bad idea. "What now?" the one with the lower voice growled. The conversation had grown more and more tense with each revelation, as both grew increasingly stressed.
"These things are doing this with one ship."
"One what?"
"One ship. There's only one ship."
Everything seemed to freeze. Kirill didn't know if that was important information, but the Tyzx around him were reacting with shock, so he had to assume that it was. He didn't even remember writing that. How much would they learn from his journal? This wasn't right. He hadn't meant to betray the humans. This shouldn't be happening. "Mother of... Are you sure?" Tsuna's superior muttered, his voice very quiet. Kirill could hardly hear it. The next words were much more clear.
"Yes, sir. The humans keep improving their ship. They never seem to decide that's enough, it's good enough. They always make it just a bit faster or more powerful. Grumpy especially never seems quite happy with it. See, just one ship."
The low-voiced superior made a rattling click that Kirill's translator interpreted as a sigh. "I'd say that's absurd, but if both devils are on one ship, it might even be possible."
"Both devils? Wasn't there just the one?"
But the more Kirill thought about it, the more sure he was that Tyzx had another. It was buried, but there was a memory that was now returning to mind. Tyzx were insular, not as much as the Ylem, but still enough to be rare outside their own space. But Kirill had seen them on occasion on Core 5. There was one time when one had disembarked, and Kirill had overheard a bit of discussion before being dragged off to unload cargo. He remembered the Tyzx kneeling with all 12 appendages and muttering to some deity, thanking them for saving them from the shadow devil of the void. Maybe they were religious figures. Kirill jumped guiltily, realizing that he was now trying to understand the Tyzx the way he understood the humans. That was really extremely stupid to do, thinking about it.
Though the humans are as dangerous as the Tyzx, probably more so.
Had he somehow forgotten what danger meant? That didn't seem right, but he wasn't shaking and hiding. He was observing. He was analyzing. Something must have given him the heart of a star, because he couldn't imagine himself being that brave otherwise. "One ship. Hungry condemn us. How are we supposed to react to this? What am I supposed to tell my superiors? They hold on to their pride. What will they do if I tell them we're losing to one ship?"
"It's a species we don't know. Will they listen if you remind them of that?"
"Not everyone is as tolerant of disrespect as I am, Tsuna. They would send me to the hungry." After a quiet moment, Tsuna resumed reading Kirill's journal.
"I don't know why they all seem to be named after emotional states. That may be how this thing thinks."
One appendage gestured vaguely in Kirill's direction. Kirill's frills pulsed a tiny bit orange at the edges, visible through the black dread. He hadn't chosen the Cuman's nicknames. They picked them themselves. It seemed unfair to blame him for those names. "Not useful. Give me something I can do something with." Tsuna nodded and took a deep breath.
"The only thing I can find is that it seems to have an emotional attachment to some of them. Perhaps they also have the same attachment. We may be able to use him."
"Political guests? An honourable tradition." Tsuna's supervisor seemed to puff up slightly. "To end a helpless war with a time-honoured tactic. Such a glorious achievement.
Every planet will remember the name of Cooks. Tina, I will permit you to join me as my aide on the ravening.
Tina bent his head slightly.
Thank you, sir.
A clear hum broke in on the discussion.
Sir, it's working. Will they accept the contact?
How should I know? But for all of Gux's confidence just a moment ago, he sounded stressed, even a bit afraid as he snapped at the others. Kirill could see his appendages shake a little bit. They're devils, why would they even... Got it. Kirill's frills flared to their limits, pulsing yellow and white. That was a very human voice. That was Dopey. They'd found him. See if you can get a visual. I want to see the bastards. That was the captain's voice, and it sounded dangerous. It wasn't explosive anger like when he had shouted at the Kuman crew. It sounded more like what happened after the Kumans left Kazukran. Kirill had been scared at that tone before. Now it left him worried. Do we have an option for visual? Gux muttered, before a large display that was probably tactical flickered and moved, causing dead silence in the room. Kirill's frills trembled, trying to extend further than they were physically capable of doing.
Dopey? Did Dopey do that?
That was a frightening idea. That display was probably not meant for video communications. He couldn't imagine what would be needed to make it display Kuman faces. Yep, there we go. Do your thing, Cap. Right. The captain's eyes seemed to flicker over everyone in the room, finally landing somewhere not quite at Kirill's location. Hey, Sleepy, you got visual? Sleepy's face appeared on the display, and Kirill felt his frills go faintly white. He was glad to see Sleepy, even if he'd been stupid and gotten kidnapped, even if his journal had betrayed the Kumans, even if Sleepy didn't want to see him again after this. He was still glad to see Sleepy. Yeah, look, there. The captain gestured to what was probably a screen in front of him. An explosive sigh escaped from Sleepy, and he closed his eyes for a brief second. Hey, spaceman. They didn't hurt you, did they? Kirill blinked. He wasn't expecting to be addressed immediately. The words dried up in his mouth somehow. His throat felt a bit scratchy, so instead, he shook his head.
No, not much.
He'd been expecting a lot worse. Good. The captain turned his attention to just slightly off from the cluster of Tyzx on the raised platform. I assume y'all wanted a meeting for a reason, right? The Tyzx was silent for a moment, then furious whispers broke out.
Is that the Shadow Devil? It sounds like it. How should I know? I've never seen the videos. Aren't they high security? They said it's invisible. Can't show up on cameras. Are you sure that's it? I said I don't know.
Gux cleared his throat as authoritatively as he could, and the room quietened. But nothing but nervous fidgeting stirring the Tyzx. You are very worthy opponents, and your abilities are impressive. We rarely try to negotiate. Consider it an acknowledgement of your skill in battle. Save your breath. Sleepy's slow voice was heavy with danger. We don't care what you think about fighting. You want something? Let's hear it. For a brief moment, Gux seemed disconcerted, but he soon recovered, and covered his mouth with his mandibles. Kirill's translator interpreted this as something akin to the Kuman's teeth-bared look. It made much more sense to hide your eating apparatus than to display it, he thought. Kumans made no sense. Yes, clearly you prefer actions to words. Well, simply put, we want your ship to withdraw from the war. His mandibles rose just a little, maybe more aggressively. Kirill wasn't sure. That shouldn't be a problem, right? We only want one ship to withdraw. All your allies can keep fighting if you've got them. Just your ship. And what are you offering in return? The captain's eyes were narrowed. Kirill shivered, shifting in the metal spheres. They didn't seem to be stuck to the floor as tightly as he thought. We'll take good care of your pet, friend, ally. It won't be injured or pressured or damaged in any way. We can't give you the collateral, of course, but we can guarantee it a nice, peaceful life on a farm planet, and An impatient movement from Sleepy, and Gooks stopped short, as if he'd forgotten how to speak. "Sleepy," the captain said slowly. "Yeah, you've got my yes. That makes 2. Sleepy's eyes glittered. "Like hell he's setting foot on those planets. Not my boy." Kirill's heart sank.
2 yeses. Iron shoes.
"Y'all are very lucky, you know." The captain's face had changed. In comparison to the Tyzx, Kirill feared that face much, much more. It wasn't the death face. It was more like a face that would never stop seeing death. "We know which planet y'all are on. That gives us a planet to spare." His eyes glittered. Kirill felt his breath stop in front of the eyes of a predator. "If you kill him, none of your planets will survive." Kirill couldn't breathe. He couldn't move, but he had to. He had to.
No, this is a mistake. Stop.
Unbelievably, he found himself ripping up the spheres more easily than he'd expected.
"Please, oh stars, please."
Kirill ran forward and found himself on his knees, staring at the floor. "Spaceman, the hell are you?" Kirill swallowed his fear. The words came out fast, too fast, but if he stopped for a second he would lose courage in front of those predatory eyes.
Captain, you told me about unacceptable sacrifices. Please, don't."
He couldn't seem to find the words. They stumbled on their way off his tongue.
You said not to take the innocent with the guilty. Please. Sleepy already did this. He's so hurt. Please. Leave anyone innocent. Please.
He was afraid. His frills were black. Looking up seemed like the last thing he could possibly do. But he did it. The captain's eyes had softened. Sleepy had a hand over his eyes, muttering under his breath what sounded like the captain's words Kirill wasn't allowed to ask about. "Bashful, plot out all the military planets." The captain sighed, looking at the Tyzx, and especially Gooks. "I hope y'all understand what just happened here. Y'all are getting some mercy because of him. But you know what? If he dies, we're going back to the old plan. So y'all better not do anything stupid." The screen then closed, leaving dead silence in the room. Kirill looked around nervously. Gooks looked almost pale, but Cinna was bent a bit, and his 7 eyes were fixed on Kirill. Respect, gratitude, Kirill's translator declared. Read by Good Bean.